Have you ever had to stand face to face with the person who stole your entire life? Right at the one place meant for a final goodbye. Mom, why are you even here? You shouldn't have shown up. Vanessa said you just ruined everything. My son's eyes were cold, like I was a total stranger. But before I could even breathe, my ex-husband's new wife cut in. Her voice was sharp, bitter, drowning out the mournful violins. She reeked of expensive perfume, total insult to a place of mourning. They think I'm here to grieve. They think I'm here for closure. They have no idea I'm here to take it all back. I walked into that cemetery with a slim envelope tucked in my bag. The only proof I ever existed in that man's life. Inside wasn't a goodbye note. It was a copy of the evidence I handed to my lawyer, Grayson, 8 months ago. Evidence proving I was scammed into signing a death warrant for my own life. I didn't bring it to threaten anyone. I brought it to remind myself this time I'm not being written out of the story. I won't be erased. 10 years of silence. 10 years of being a ghost. And now I'm back not as the discarded ex-wife, but as the one holding the truth. As I stepped in, the air went heavy, like a storm was about to break. Conversations just stopped. Necks snapped in my direction. People whispered my name like a forbidden word. It's been over a decade, and here I am standing at the funeral of the man I started a business with in a tiny garage in Minneapolis, hitting them like a hurricane they never saw coming. Richard Miller is lying there now in an oak casket. On top is a wreath of white roses. Vanessa picked the one flower I always hated. The soft violin music is playing, but it can't hide the secret I'm holding in that casket. There isn't just a body. There's an unopened will. And in that will, I'm the one chosen to decide everything. They think they won. That woman is smirking at me from the spot that should have been mine. But they don't know. The dead can still speak. This afternoon isn't just a funeral, it's a final judgment, and the truth. It's about to explode right in the middle of this service. I took one more step. And then I heard that piercing voice. What right do you have to be here, Vanessa? She lunged toward me, eyes spitting fire, hissing every word. Her designer coat snapped with every aggressive step, making the mourners jump. This is a family service. You're not family anymore. I stood my ground, didn't say a word. I just looked at her like time hadn't passed at all. Then a deep, steady voice came from behind us. Vanessa, that's enough. It was Richard's father. He and his wife stepped forward from the front row. Their faces set in stone. Mrs. Miller gently placed her hand on my shoulder, her former daughter-in-law land. Her voice was soft but unbreakable. If anyone deserves to be here today, it's Jane. No one else. Silence fell like a lead weight. Vanessa froze. Ethan, my son, just caught my eye for a second, his jaw tight. I knew I wasn't welcome. I knew this space hadn't belonged to me for a long time. But I didn't come for them. I didn't come to make a scene. Came for the man who used to be my entire world. A part of me, maybe the strongest part, needed to see the end. I needed to close the final chapter, no matter how much it hurt. I walked slowly along the grass path, the sound of my heels muffled by the damp earth. Around me, the whispering started again. I caught bits of it. Is that her? Why show up after all these years? I didn't look back. I didn't bow my head. I kept my spine straight, the only thing left of a woman who had been pushed out of her own life. I chose to stand at the very back under a bare maple tree. I didn't push to the front or demand a spot in the formal ceremony. I just gripped my coat and stayed quiet the same way I've been for 10 years. I felt like I was standing in a courtroom, but I wasn't ashamed, because they don't know the whole story. Most of them never did. The minister started the eulogy. People began to cry, and all those memories I tried to bury started clawing their way back up, like someone had ransacked an old closet. Our first Christmas, that tiny house on the corner, Ethan learning to ride a bike, Lily laughing in the backyard, Then everything. Blurred, replaced by a different memory. The suffocating silence of those final dinners. The clink of silverware against plates was our only language. I remember reaching across the table just to touch his hand. He didn't pull away, but he didn't hold it either. He just let it sit there, cold, indifferent, like I was touching a piece of glass. And now, in the present, it's only silence. After the service, it was Lily's turn. My daughter held a printed Bible, her voice trembling slightly, but every word rang clear in the autumn wind. Vanessa tilted her head, acting the part. Ethan stared down at his shoes. Both of them looked like they were waiting for something else a moment they were convinced belonged solely to them. Then a man in a sharp charcoal suit stepped forward, gripping a black leather briefcase. His voice was deep, clinical, the final wishes of Mr. Richard Miller. A portion of his last will and testament will be read here immediately following the service. The air went dead silent. You could feel the tension in every spine. People started glancing at each other, whispering behind cupped hands. Vanessa grabbed Ethan's hand not for comfort, but as a signal. The moment they'd been waiting for all month was finally here. I just stood there. I looked at the casket and felt ... nothing, just an observer. Because I knew once some doors are open, they can never be closed again. I thought it was over. But there was something left unsaid. No one moved. No one breathed. And in that heartbeat, I knew this story. It was only getting started. Before the name Jane Miller became a tragic whisper at dinner parties, I was just a wife, a mother, a woman who believed that if you give enough of yourself, happiness is just a given. Richard and I were together for nearly 30 years. And for most of that time, I believed we had something solid, something sacred. We met back when we couldn't even afford a decent meal. I was the girl who liked arranging flowers and drawing with pastels. He was the tech student with big dreams of his own electronics firm. His world was deadlines, blueprints, and numbers. Mine was intuition, colors, and feelings I didn't have. Names for yet. We got married on a spring afternoon. Small wedding, a rushed cake, a rented dress, but we laughed the whole time. We were building a sandcastle with our bare hands, never imagining the tide would actually come in. We started in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the ground floor of an old neighborhood. I arranged flowers for rent money. He built his company. Right on the kitchen table. Between quick lunches and unpaid bills, we talked about the future. When people talked about a home, I thought I was already living in one. I thought we were building a roof over our heads together. I didn't realize that in the end, I'd be the only one left standing inside it. We lived on 99-cent ramen and massive dreams. We kept telling ourselves it'll get easier soon. And eventually it did. Richard's business took off. The clients came. Then the money followed. Soon, he was wearing suits that cost more than our old rent. I stayed home with Ethan and Lily. Sometimes I'd paint, not to sell. Just to remind myself who I was before I became just mom. I handled the school runs, the handmade lunches, the PTA meetings. I taught the kids how to bake, how to give a real apology, and how to stand up for themselves. And Richard, he was always late, but I always kept his dinner warm. When he went on business trips, I'd tuck handwritten notes into his suitcase. He didn't always notice. But I didn't do it for a thank you. I did it because I loved him, because I thought we were building something together. Or maybe I just forced myself to believe that. That suburban house in Minneapolis, see, designed every inch of it. The backyard was full of hydrangeas because I loved how wild they looked. Earth-toned walls, soft lighting. Every corner was a memory. Baby photos, Lily's preschool drawings, Richard's first awards, and that ugly clay dog Ethan made in 2nd grade. We weren't flashy, but we had roots. Looking back, I see it now. The scale was never balanced. I just refused to look at it. Richard was the one getting the pats on the back, the one everyone knew, the face of success. Me, I was the foundation, the invisible layer. And I didn't mind. Honestly, I never needed to be seen. I believed in partnership, not a performance. Time flew. The kids grew up, the company expanded. We traded the old sedan for 2 luxury cars. Trips to Paris, Costa Rica, cruises to Alaska. From the outside, we were the American dream. Neighbors were jealous. Friends asked for advice. And me, I felt a quiet pride. At least, I tried to tell myself I did. I thought those roots would hold through any storm. I never imagined the biggest hurricane would come from the very person who helped me plant them. And I definitely didn't realize that the thing that would rip everything out of the ground, was a power of attorney form I signed with total trust. A paper that I'd later realize was the death warrant for my entire life. But then, started to wonder, was I confusing comfort with connection? Richard was drifting. I filled the gaps with forgiveness. Told myself, he's just stressed. It's peak season. He's doing it all for the family. But the truth was, Mike was terrified to look at what was right in front of me. I thought if I just tried a little harder, it would work. But some things, the harder you grip, the faster they slide away. The man I called my husband was becoming a stranger. Worse than that, he was becoming a man who didn't even see me anymore. No shouting matches, no threats to leave. Just silence. A soft, cold silence like dust settling on forgotten bookshelves. I'd ask about his day, he'd nod. Scroll. I'd show him a painting I finished. He'd glance at it. That's nice, he'd say, then go right back to his laptop. He wasn't cruel. He was just gone. His body was in the room, but his mind was 1,000 miles away. I didn't think we were broken. Oh, I thought we were just hitting a rough patch. That dry, hollow stretch every long marriage eventually goes through. I told myself sometimes love is just quiet like this. Maybe comfort was enough. I clung to that thought like a lifeline. I believed we had weathered every storm, that we were safe. I had no clue while I was busy tending to our garden. Richard had checked out of this marriage a long time ago. The first sign didn't come with a fight or a door slammed shut. It came under white linens and glasses of red wine during a night called an achievement gala. We were invited to a banquet, downtown string quartets, tiny appetizers, ice sculptures carved into the company logo. Richard was receiving the Outstanding Leadership Award. I spent the whole afternoon getting ready. It's the midnight blue dress he used to love. The silver necklace from our 20th anniversary. My hair curled just the way he liked it. I didn't want to stand out. I just wanted to be seen. By him. But the moment we arrived, Richard cut himself loose from me. I told myself he needs to network, shake hands, work the room. This is his night. I stood by the bar with a glass of white wine, nodding to strangers. From across the room, I watched him laugh, patting backs and raising toasts. Richard always outshone everyone at these things, was the center of gravity, and I was. Just in the background. I never minded that, till it happened. A business partner came over to say hello. Richard was standing with a group of colleagues. I stepped closer, smiling, reaching out my hand. Then he said it. Oh, and this is Jane. She keeps me sane. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, even though I didn't find it funny. My hand just hovered in the air before slowly dropping to my side. She keeps me sane. Not my wife. Not my partner who built this with me. Just an emotional support. Or a piece of furniture in the corner of the room. It's a tiny sentence in a loud room. But it hit my heart like a ton of bricks. That night I kept smiling, clinking glasses, taking photos. And clapping when Richard walked onto the stage. He thanked his team, his mentors, his late father. Not a single word for me. I told myself he'd probably just forgot. He didn't want to get off topic by mentioning his wife. But as I was busy making excuses for him, I realized my chest had gone cold. It felt like the lights had been sucked right out of me. On the drive home, I turned to him at a red light and asked softly, "What you said tonight? About me keeping you sane. Do you really think that's all I do? He didn't even look up from his phone, scrolling through congratulatory texts. It was just a joke, he said. Don't be so sensitive. Sensitive. That word started following me like a shadow. The problem wasn't that I wasn't loved anymore. It was that I no longer mattered. Every time I said I was hurt, he had one answer. You're too sensitive. No apology. Just a wall cold enough to make sure I couldn't reach him. Anymore, I pulled back. My hope pulled back too, just so I wouldn't feel like a fool again. After the gala, the house went quiet. He was busy with meetings. I was busy with laundry. But inside me, something had cracked. Quiet as a drop of water hitting a hardwood floor. At midnight. No one heard it but me. I stopped waiting at the door. I stopped cooking elaborate dinners. I stopped asking, "How was your day?" I just watched the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his shirt. The business calls filled with laughter that was more intimate than any dinner we had at home. I tried to soothe myself with the usual phrases, "He's just busy, this will pass." But the memory of that gala, the keeping me sane comment, stayed full and heavy like a question mark made of freezing glass, hanging right over my heart. I didn't know that my replacement had been there for a long time. Vanessa, the new secretary transferred from the West Coast branch. Sharp eyes, a practiced smile, always on time. Back then, I just saw an efficient employee. I didn't see the eyes of a predator, or realize that every time she mentioned a new strategy in front of me, she was taking a hidden swing at my position. I didn't know yet. I just felt the house sinking. No cracks, no collapse, just losing its foundation from the inside out. We still slept in the same bed, still said, "Enjoy your meal," still kissed goodnight. But deep down, everything was dead silent. Richard started coming home later, then not coming home at all. Partner dinner. Emergency meeting, business trip? I stopped asking because every time I did, he'd just say, "It's just work, Jane." I used to know exactly what that work was. I helped build it with my own two hands. Now I was being pushed out like an uninvited guest. It wasn't until much later, looking at company photos, that I noticed the way she looked at Richard. It wasn't an employee's admiration. It was the cold calculation of a hunter measuring her prey. She didn't just want Richard. She wanted to erase me. The way she talked about the company's new direction while looking at me like I was a piece of outdated furniture. It made me start to doubt my own worth. One night, I made his favorite lemon chicken, roasted carrots, garlic butter, mashed potatoes. I lit candles not for romance, just to try one last time. 8:13 p.m. No text, no call. Just a message from Ethan. Dad says he's in a late meeting. Don't wait up. I folded the napkins, blew out the candles, and ate alone. At the table I picked out in the house I dreamed of, with the man who once promised I'd never be lonely again. And then, one day, I stopped trying. Not because I gave up, but because there was no one left to hold on to. I opened a bottle of red wine, our 30th anniversary bottle. No return, no call, no text. I waited until midnight. The food went cold, the candles burned out. Blew out. Each flame, and sat on the edge of the bed in my best dress staring at the door. The next morning. He walked in at 7 a.m., still in yesterday's clothes. "Didn't you see my text? I stayed at the hotel. The party ran late." There was no text. I wanted to scream, to smash glasses, to ask, "What am I to you?" But instead, I just nodded and went to brew coffee, no sugar, just a splash of cream. That was the moment I got it. I wasn't weak, I was just exhausted. Exhausted from begging for scraps of affection. Exhausted from opening my heart only to have him wave it away with a "You're just being sensitive." After that night, everything went on as if nothing had cracked. But me. I had finally gone silent. He started mocking me right in front of the kids. One night at dinner, Lily mentioned wanting to take a gap year before college. I smiled and told her she should go for it if she felt she needed it. Richard just lost it. He started laughing. "See? This is what happens when you spend too much time with your mother. You lose all sense of discipline. Ethan laughed along. Lily just looked down at her plate, and me. I stayed silent. I knew. Right then. I was losing the kids who used to think I was their entire world. He became the fun dad. The one who bought the new iPhones, took them skiing, played golf. I was just the one reminding them to brush their teeth, checking their homework and asking questions no one bothered to answer. They didn't see the way he iced me out. They didn't see him interrupt me like I was invisible. In their eyes, I was. Just a sad, overly emotional mother. He was gone every weekend. Work trip, client dinner, emergency. I stopped asking. Every time I did, he'd just sigh. It's just work, Jane. You know how it is. But I didn't know anymore. I used to. Be the one making his slides, cheering from the back of the room, ironing his suits for every big meeting. Now, I was just the person cleaning his desk with no clue where he was going, what he was doing, or who he was with. One night I made his absolute favorite. Lemon chicken, roasted carrots, garlic butter mashed potatoes. I lit candles, folded. The napkins played the jazz music he used to love. And I waited. That was the moment I knew it wasn't that he forgot our anniversary. It wasn't an emergency. It was that I was no longer part of his plan. There was no formal breakup, no public betrayal, just 1,000 tiny cuts every single day as he peeled me out of his life like a photo being ripped from an album. Leaving no trace behind, I sat on the edge of the tub, burying my face in a towel, wondering, did I ever actually exist to him? When exactly? Did I disappear? I stayed because I believed in my vows. I believed in the for better or worse. Kept telling myself just a little more effort. He'll come back. But I get it now, loving someone can't be a solo war. And I was the only one on the battlefield then one day. He stopped hiding it. It happened on a Sunday, one of those days that's supposed to be sacred. Or at least ... peaceful. A small engagement party for Lily. Just family. Some cake, champagne bubbling over jazz music on the patio. I'd spent all week preparing, polishing the silver, setting the garden table, picking fresh flowers from the Saturday market. I used to love those little things. Not to be the perfect hostess, but because you only feel truly cared for in the tiny details. Richard didn't ask a single question or offer to help. I'd stopped expecting him to notice. That morning, he showed up in khakis and a navy shirt, clean-shaven with that familiar smile like he'd never left. Lily ran to hug him, her eyes lighting up. I saw a glimpse of the father she used to know. Me. I just took a few steps back, keeping my distance just enough so I didn't have to swallow my tears. Ethan showed up later, quiet as usual. He always watched from the sidelines, just like his father. I stayed in the kitchen, prepping fruit and appetizers, smiling when I had to, nodding at the right times, making sure I didn't stand near Richard. We've gotten used to this parallel existence, no friction, no connection. But what I didn't see coming was the stab. It was so fast and so sharp. I didn't even have time to flinch. The party was winding down. Daniel, Lily's fiancé, stood up. He's a sweet, shy guy, but so sincere. He said a few words about love, then turned to Richard and me. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, for hosting this amazing party. You two are a true inspiration. Everyone clapped. I smiled, but my stomach, it just nodded up. Richard raised his glass, squinted with a grin, and said, well, if Lily got half the brains from her mother and double the sanity, I'd say I've won the jackpot. People laughed. Not loud, but loud enough to hurt. I turned my head, and there she was, Vanessa, Richard's secretary, the right hand on every major project, standing there with a mimosa in her hand, wearing the exact shade of lipstick I used to wear. I went numb. It wasn't just what he said. It was how smooth it was, like he'd rehearsed it. Like I was just a name on a list of things to be discarded. A midday assassination, right in the middle of our daughter's party, surrounded by the smiles of people who once promised to protect me. I just stood there in that empty space, quietly bracing myself for the hurricane I didn't know was coming. I wasn't bleeding. I was just disappearing from the story. I was just a side character in a story where he was the lead, the sensitive model wife, the sacrificial housewife who should just be grateful to even be mentioned at all. I caught the eye of Harper, an old friend who used to adore me. She looked away, awkward, then turned like she'd never known me. And I stood up. No tears, no screaming, no accusations. I just walked away. I went upstairs, every footstep sounding like a knock on the door of my own heart. I went into our old bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared into the vanity mirror. My lipstick was smudged. A lock of hair had fallen out of its clip. I looked exhausted, older than I remembered. Downstairs, the laughter was still going, the music was playing, the champagne was pouring. Like I never existed. I didn't cry. There were no tears left. It was just a sound thin, like a dry branch snapping in the middle of winter. Something inside me shattered. It wasn't anger, not exactly pain. It was a kind of clarity, a bone-chilling cold. That night, after the guests left, the house was quiet again. Richard was on the sofa with a glass of scotch, eyes glued to the TV. I walked up to him, my voice as soft as a breeze through a cracked door. "What you said today, in front of everyone, did you really mean that?" He glanced over, his lip curling. "It was just a joke. Jane, you need to stop being so sensitive. Stop being sensitive." There it was again, the ultimate shield. It's a perfect excuse to dodge responsibility and never, ever have to apologize. I didn't answer. I just nodded. I didn't go to the living room that night. I stayed in my bed. But between us, there was a gap that no words could ever fill. 3 days later, Ritor told me he was moving to a temporary office for a while. Companies. Busy. Easier to handle things from there. It was an announcement, not a conversation. No hug goodbye. No lingering look. Just a rolling suitcase, quietly vanishing behind the door. And I had no clue that was the moment everything had actually begun. No breakup. No fight, just I had been removed from his life piece by piece. No one said goodbye, just a door, closing very quietly. My heart didn't break in that moment, not because it didn't hurt, but because I'd been silently preparing for this collision for an entire year. But when the words actually came out of his mouth, still stung like swallowing broken glass. "I think it's better if I stay at the office for a while." His voice was flat, like he was reading a meeting schedule, not ending a marriage. "Company's busy. I need to focus." I looked at him. "You mean you're moving out?" He didn't answer right away. He just shrugged. Then he dropped a line that felt like it had been scripted months ago. "We've been living like roommates for too long, Jane. We need some space." Space, not a reason, not an apology. Just a decision wrapped in polite packaging. He didn't admit there was someone else, but I knew. I knew from the way he stopped looking at me. From the lingering scent of that strange vanilla perfume on his Caleras, a scent I'd never choose. He wasn't sad or angry or even hesitant. He was just cold and clinical, like he was divesting from a project that was no longer profitable. The house was empty that night. Lily was at school. Ethan was out. No audience, no one to explain things to. It's just him and me. In a house that used to be a dream now, just a hollow shell. I nodded. "Okay, whatever you want." No arguing. Number. Begging. No, why? My own calmness. It actually shocked me. But maybe, after all those years of being erased from the eyes of the man who meant everything to me, I just didn't have the energy to play the part anymore. He left that night, taking only a few clothes and his laptop. The sound of his suitcase rolling across the tile was so light, as if he'd never truly belonged there. Me, I stayed. I still woke up early to brew coffee, still watered the plants, still organized the closet as if by tidying up. I could somehow rearrange the shattered pieces of my heart. When I told the kids, their reactions were split. Ethan just nodded. Maybe it's for the best, Mom. You've been so sensitive lately. There it was again. Sensitive. The perfect word to shut down any real emotion. Lily just cried. She clung to me, asking over and over, "Can't you guys work it out?" I thought this was just a phase. I didn't answer, just held her, because honestly, didn't even know when I'd officially disappeared from his life. I lived in that house for a few weeks after he left until one day, the large envelope arrived and it hit me. Mun had planned this much more carefully than I thought. I thought him leaving was the end. Turns out, it was just the beginning. For the first time in decades. The silence in the house didn't feel heavy with disappointment. It was empty, but clean. There were days I'd just lay on the sofa, staring at the white ceiling, wondering, was any of it worth it? Was I wasting my best years on a man who never loved me enough? Did I stay too long out of duty? Love? Fear? Or was I just hoping the man I first married would eventually come back? Then some days I'd feel something smoldering under the ashes of my sadness. Not joy, not yet, just a little room to breathe. To think. To remember who I was before my life became an extension of someone else's ambition. I didn't tell. Lily, I didn't tell my mom. Just kept living in the house he walked away from. I cleaned rooms, tended the garden, scheduled dental appointments. I tried to believe this was a new chapter, not a finale. Until one morning I heard a sound at the door. A large envelope was sitting on the mat. I picked it up. Recipient, me sender. The State Court of Minnesota. I froze. I hadn't done anything. Was this a mistake? I checked the name, the address, everything was correct. I opened it. My heart didn't even race. It just went numb, like my body already knew a blow was coming. It was a summons for a civil lawsuit. Plaintiff, Richard Miller. Reason, financial investment, malpractice related to Miller Tech. I went cold. Then the memory hit me a slow afternoon 3 years ago. Vanessa, the new secretary who'd only been there a few months, walked in with a stack of papers. "Jane, if you could just sign these for Richard." Just a side. "Project for the company." I was careful. I called him. "Yeah, just sign it," he said. "It's a small investment. Easier if it's in your name for now." I didn't read the fine print. I saw the company logo. The paperwork looked standard. I signed it because for 30 years, that's what I did. I trusted Richard. I stood behind every plan, even if my name was never mentioned. Now I know that paper was a trap. The project never existed. It was a shell, a move designed to pin the liability on me. I was the negligent, independent partner. I didn't scream, didn't hit the table. I didn't wail. Why? I just sat. They're in our old kitchen, looking out at the backyard where I planted the hydrangeas, where we had those warm dinners, where he promised we'd never leave each other. I didn't tell Lily. I didn't tell my mom. I just opened my laptop and typed civil defense attorney. Not to win it all back, I knew the game was rigged. I just wanted someone on my side for the first time in a very long time. I just wanted one person to stand with me. Had no idea what that was going to cost me. My lawyer's name was Rebecca. She didn't smile much, talked straight, and most importantly, she didn't ask me why I signed that paper. She just said, "He's not suing for the money. It's building a legal file for a divorce where he doesn't have to share a dime." I nodded. Not because I understood the law, but because I finally understood Richard. And exactly how he planned. The hearing was quiet. No press, no family, just a few legal assistants and a mountain of paperwork pointed at me like a loaded gun. Financial. Reports, investment contracts, risk assessments. Every piece of evidence was another stone on my shoulders, until the very last one, my own signature. That afternoon 3 years ago, I only signed because Richard said, "It's just an investment." Restructuring. Vanessa's handling it all. I didn't realize Vanessa was behind it. Didn't realize the project was a fake, a setup to drain funds and dump the blame on me. The court didn't care that I'd called my husband. They didn't care that I wasn't a lawyer. They only looked at one thing, the signature. I lost the case. Rebecca wasn't even surprised. She just sighed and said, "Brace yourself for the divorce papers." Less than 2 weeks later, they were served. A unilateral filing. To reason. Gross financial negligence causing severe damages. I was stripped of everything, no house. No shares, no alimony, not even a thank you for 30 years of service. Everything was in Richard's name. The court's conclusion. I was a liability. I walked away with nothing. I didn't say a word. Just moved back into my mom's place. Sat on the porch and drank half a glass of cheap wine while watching the moon hang over the neighbor's roof. I felt nothing. No sadness, no anger. Just a massive, quiet void. Lily found out first. She came home from school with tears streaming down her face. I just held her in the kitchen, silent. Ethan didn't even call. He just sent an email. "I think this is for the best for both of you." A sentence colder than the court's verdict. I didn't leave the house for days. Every time I woke up, I'd forget for a split second, then remember. I'd have to learn how to breathe all over again. One morning, while my mom and I were folding blankets, she asked, "Do you regret trusting him?" I froze, then shook my head. "No, Mom. I only regret forgetting who I was while I did." A few weeks later, I saw a post going viral. A photo of Richard standing next to Vanessa, hand in hand, beaming at a charity gala. And right there with them were Ethan and Lily, a new family. Without me, I didn't cry. I just looked at the photo, really looked at it, and for the first time it clicked. I had been written out of the very story I helped create. I had lost everything. But because of that, I finally knew exactly where I was going. I don't remember what I told my mom that day. I just remember the smell of baking bread in that old kitchen and the fuzzy slippers she still kept neatly by the door. Like 10 years hadn't changed a thing, except for me. She didn't ask questions. She didn't smother me. It's just not a da. Tiny gesture that said she'd known this day was coming all along. That night, I didn't eat. I didn't cry. I just sat there listening to the old wooden clock I used to hate because the ticking was too loud. Now that ticking was the only thing letting me know I was still alive. The days after were a blur. I slept a lot, but never felt rested. My eyes were closed, my head was empty, but my chest felt like someone was sitting on my heart. Mom didn't push. She just cooked an extra portion for dinner, put a cup of tea on my table every morning, and said, "If it's sunny, remember to water the lavender on the porch." No advice, no pity, just presence. Steady as the earth after a storm. *A. Week later, Lily showed up unannounced. 3 soft knocks. She had a Whole Foods bag and a box of the chocolates I used to love. "I told Dad I was going to a study group," she whispered. I didn't know whether to laugh or sob. I just pulled her inside and poured another tea. We didn't say much. Lily sat on the living room floor, opening her books just like she did when she was a kid. I watched her from behind and saw myself before I knew what betrayal tasted like. The week after that, she came back with some old drawings I'd taught her to paint in 2nd grade. She taped them to the wall, not caring who saw them. For the first time in months, I smiled. One morning, Mom cracked the door. "Want to go?" "For a walk." I shook my head. 10 minutes later, she was back, dropping a light jacket on the bed. "It's chilly out." And I actually got up. We walked down the small street in silence. Everything felt slow, like the first breath of the day. For the first time since the collapse, I didn't feel invisible anymore. Time doesn't heal you instantly, but it gives you something else, room to breathe. No rush, no pressure to be okay. Just enough peace to hear yourself again. One morning, I brushed my hair and looked in the mirror. I saw a stranger was still me, but I wasn't straining to hold up a crumbling world anymore. I turned to my mom, who was knitting on the porch. What if I want to work again? She didn't even look up. Then go, Jane. It's time. I wasn't running away. I was going. Find myself. I got a job as an assistant at a local community arts center. Small class 12 kids with paint on their sleeves and laughter that filled the room. I taught them how to mix colors, how to catch the light, how to not be afraid of the messy parts. They didn't know I used to be the wife of a multi-million-dollar CEO. To them, I was just Ms. Jane, the lady who can paint a rainbow with only 3 colors. And one afternoon, when a little girl handed me her first finished painting, it hit me there are values that don't need a contract or shares to be real. While I was learning how to live again, Risha was starting to pay the price for leaving. It didn't start with a crash or a sudden agony in the middle of the night. It was just a cough-dry, raspy, lingering too long. He thought it was allergies. Then came the insomnia, the unexplained weight loss, and one tiny speck of blood on a white silk handkerchief. For the first time, he stopped. Not because he was afraid, but because his body was starting to betray him. The clinic. The CT scanner made a steady click-click sound. Richard lay perfectly still, eyes wide, but seeing nothing. The doctor didn't have to say much. The look on his face said it all. Lung cancer. Stage 4. No surgery, no cure. Just management. Or letting go. He went home that afternoon. Vanessa wasn't there. A Prada bag sat half open on the table. Inside, a hotel receipt. Guest name, Alex Double Room. That wasn't when he discovered the truth. It was just the first scratch in his armor. And he started to feel very, very cold. 3 days later, the garage was silent. The back door was cracked. Open, the wind whistling through, and then a voice. Very clear. He won't last much longer. When it's done, just make sure the transfer papers are in order. A man's voice, answered Alex, his private driver. What about Ethan? You think he'll take a side? Ours. He hates his. Mother thinks she's the one who trashed the company. A burst of laughter followed, sharp as glass. Cutting glass. Richard didn't move. He didn't bang on the door or scream. He just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, sweat soaking his forehead even with the AC on. For the first time in his life, he was terrified. Not of death, but of the truth, that everything he had fought to keep was no longer his. He went back to his office, took off his coat, and poured a scotch, no ice, no toast, just sat. Vanessa, Alex, Ethan, every name was like a jagged scratch on the side of the glass. No tears, no shouting. Just one question echoing in his head. Did anyone ever actually stand by me? That night, he didn't sleep. Not because of the hallway lights, but because the image of me kept looping in his head like a broken film strip. When his hair started falling out from the chemo, the first person he wanted to call was me, Jane, but he was the one who pushed me away for another woman. For a fake contract, for a lie that had gone on so long he couldn't even remember how it started. Ethan only asked about shares. Vanessa disappeared for days at a time. Only Jane, the only one who never wanted anything from him, and the only one who ever truly loved him. Think that. That was what made him feel so hopelessly small. Some things, you'll only realize their worth once they're gone. Richard didn't know how much time he had left, but he knew he could do one right thing before it was too late. But sometimes it's not the disease that breaks you. It's the truth. The chemo room felt like cold steel. Not because of the AC, but because in there, you don't count by days anymore. You just count down. 4 tubes dangling, dry skin, the bitter taste of metal, the smell of rubbing alcohol soaking into your soul. Richard sat there in silence, watching strands of hair fall into the sink. He picked up every single one, as if he could somehow stitch back the parts of himself that time had stripped away. A week later, the first envelope arrived. No return address. Just a photo. Vanessa in a red dress, head on Alex's shoulder, kissing him right in front of a hotel. No hiding, no hesitation, zero guilt. Richard set the photo down, gripped the sink, and retched. Not because of the cancer, because of the shred of pride he had left. He didn't scream. He didn't smash anything. He just stood there as if he'd just been told he had died long before the sickness even showed up. 3 days later, Ethan showed up with his wife. No flowers, no "Are you in pain, Dad?" Just a MacBook, a contract, and an asset distribution sheet. His wife opened her email, her voice as flat as a price tag. "You should transfer the ownership now, Dad, to avoid complications later." Richard just nodded. No reaction, no questions. Just a nod like a man who finally understood that even on his deathbed, he was just a piece of merchandise waiting to be traded. Ethan left 15 minutes later. No hug, no backward glance. That afternoon, Lily came. She brought a container of homemade soup, a small book, and silence. She sat by the bed, fed him spoonful by spoonful, and started to read. No empty comfort. No blame. She just read as if he were the only person in the world who deserved to be heard. Richard didn't say a word, but after Lily left, he broke down, not from the pain, but because for the first time in years, he knew exactly who was going to stay and who was just waiting for him to vanish. When night fell, Vanessa sat by his bed, holding his hand. Her voice soft, like the lead actress in a bad soap opera. "I told the doctor to change your meds." "Shh, don't worry. I'll handle all the paperwork." "Ethan, he only thinks about himself these days." Richard didn't react. He just stared at the wall. He knew the truth. She wasn't there for him, and she didn't care if he believed her or not. He was done playing his part. The very first week he was diagnosed, he'd hired a private investigator. The hotel receipts, the texts to Alex, the midnight calls, everything was already with his lawyer, Grayson. Vanessa thought she was in control, but she forgot one thing. A dying man has no reason to pretend. With Ethan, she played the peaceful stepmother role. Behind his back, she trashed him to Richard. "He doesn't care about you. He just wants the company." She thought Richard would cut Ethan out and leave it all to her. The firm, the money, the legacy. But she didn't understand one thing. Her betrayal was just a copy of Richard's own. And Richard, had already made up his mind, was going to let them both sit side by side during the reading of the will so they could hit the floor together. Once the truth was stripped bare, there was only one thing left he had to write with his own hand. How's your mother doing?" Richard asked quietly, his voice drifting with the steam on the hospital window. Lily didn't answer right away. She just smiled a smile that told Richard she knew. She knew it wasn't a question. It was a confession. Not curiosity, but regret. That afternoon, he called his lawyer. The file sat on the table, heavy not because of the pages, but because every sheet was a slice taken out of what he once called love. "Rewrite the will." His voice was firm. "Her name is out. Ethan's name is out. The company goes to Lily." The lawyer didn't look surprised. He just nodded and started typing it all out. The assets, the real estate, the shares, the investment. Accounts divided into 3 parts. For Jane, for Lily, for Richard's parents. Ethan was cut. Vanessa got nothing. He left them with exactly what they had left him with, nothing. Later that day, his parents came. Mr. Miller brought an old, book-worn cover, broken spine, the one he used to read to Richard when he was a boy. Mrs. Miller didn't say much. She just wiped her son's face with a handkerchief she had embroidered herself. No blame, no lectures. Just a look so warm and soft it seemed to say, "We still have each other in the few days we have left." That night, Richard sat alone, his hand shaking as he put pen to paper. Not a contract, not an asset split, a final word. He wrote line after line. No erasing, no editing, just the truth. For the first time in his life, it wasn't for profit or image or a plan. It was for the woman who believed in him until the very end. "Jane, read this when you're ready." No address, no sender, just an envelope carrying everything he never had the courage to say. The next morning, he handed it to Lily. "Don't open it." His voice was raspy, broken. "Give it to your Mom, The second I'm gone. Not after the funeral. Not through a story. Before one look. One nod. And one final sentence he whispered as if to himself, "Your mother deserves to know the truth from me." Not a will, a letter. To the person he owed the most. I opened the envelope in silence. Lily had placed it in my hand on a gray, misty afternoon. Her voice so low she seemed afraid to touch something already shattered. "Dad asked me to give this to you." As soon as he passed, I looked at her. She turned and walked out, leaving me alone with a thin piece of paper and the memories no one ever wants to dig up. DGIK La Bien, DCH VBN. Hoa, Sang, Ting, An, Cho, Fan Cao, Tra, Siu, Isiang, GC. A Cao Chai Un. P Dong Nujan Taisi Shuhari Ji Tu Ra, MT Kuch Bon Drama, Confession Beyond UN. TU Cho YouTube TikTok. I sat down. My hands were shaking. The first line hit my chest like a physical blow. "Jane, if you're holding this, it means I no longer have the chance to say this to your face. And honestly, I probably don't deserve to be heard by you." I kept reading word by word as if for the first time in my life. Someone was finally being honest with me. I was wrong. Not just once, but over and over again. I let my ego, my pride, and my utter stupidity drive me while you were the only person who never turned your back. I swallowed hard. No tears, just a massive knot in my throat. I pushed you out. I blamed you. I tricked you into signing those papers knowing exactly what was hidden behind them. Then I used that very thing to divorce you. But what kept me awake at night wasn't the assets. It was the woman I once had let slip away because I thought love was something you could just replace. I went numb. The clock ticking on the wall felt like it was counting every one of his sins. Vanessa betrayed me. Not just once, but for years. I hired a private investigator. I saw everything, the things you never deserved to carry. Ethan, he doesn't know. He believed me. And then I led him down the same path I used to abandon you. Now he only asks about the company, never the man. Only Lily, she still has that light you used to have. She's the one who wiped the sweat after I vomited, held my hand when my hair fell out in clumps, and still asked, "What do you need, Dad?" As if I'd never hurt a soul. I set the letter down. My trembling hand touched the edge of the paper. Outside, the wind caught the curtains. The sunset poured into the room like a gray shroud, slowly closing the curtain on my old life. No anger, no crying, no joy, just breathing. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for being alive. That night, I picked up my brushes again. Not to impress anyone, not to post on social media, not to be seen. Just to paint for me. A painting with no borders, no rules. No one watching over my shoulder. I painted an open sky. No husband, no old address, no crushing past. Just Jane, who no longer needs validation from anyone to exist. A Jane who finally knows. No one can take away the value you found for yourself. The letter ended. One life and began a truth. The earth was filled back in. The ebony casket lay still under the damp soil, covered in white flowers and final handfuls of dirt from the family. I stood at the very back, under the shadow of a ginkgo tree, dry leaves falling onto the grass. Inside, there was this strange feeling, like I was saying goodbye to someone who had left a long time ago. Today, this was just the final click of a door that had been closing for years. The minister read the final words and stepped down. Then, a man in a charcoal suit stepped forward. I recognized him, Edward Grayson, Richard's private attorney. He nodded to the crowd, his voice deep and steady. "I am the legal representative for Mr. Richard Miller. Before his passing, he requested that his will be read immediately following the funeral." In the presence of all family members, Vanessa cut a glance at Ethan. A tiny smirk played on her lips, ready to collect. They were convinced this was their moment to step up and take it all. Grayson opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick, sealed file. According to the will signed on March 12th at Ramsey Hospital, certified by doctors and witnesses, Mr. Richard Miller declares, personal assets, including real estate, stocks, and investment accounts, shall be transferred to Jane Elizabeth Miller. A cold wind ripped through the crowd. Vanessa froze. Ethan's brow furrowed. Me. I just stood there, Grayson continued. Management of Miller Tech will be transferred to his daughter, Lily Ann Miller. Company shares are divided into 3. Equal parts, 1 for Jane, 1 for Lily, and the final part for Richard's parents, Charles and Margaret Miller. He paused. The air was thick enough to choke on. Additionally, Mr. Richard Miller leaves his son, Ethan Miller, a cabin in Vermont and a savings account totaling $75,000. This is a final gift. The hope that Ethan can start over in his own way. Vanessa bolted up, her voice shaking. With rage, that's impossible. I am his legal wife. She's just an ex-wife who's been out of the picture for a decade. This is insane. Lily stepped forward, soft but firm. Mom being here is the only thing that's right. Not everyone showed up for the money. The atmosphere shattered. Ethan stood up too, his face flushed. My father left everything to the woman who walked away. I'm his only son. I ran the company. I stayed with him until the end. And I get a piece of land and a few $1,000. Grayson looked up. Hand raised, voice rock solid. Legally, Ms. Vanessa is the current spouse. However, we have extensive evidence of adultery, financial abuse, along with recordings, documents, and witnesses gathered by Mr. Richard himself 6 months before his passing. Vanessa turned white. Her eyes darted around, the smirk long gone. There was only the sound of her gripping her designer bag as she quietly slunk away down the tree-lined path. Ethan stayed there, hands in his pockets, jaw set. He turned to his grandfather. I worked nonstop. I was there until the end. And this is all I get. Charles put a hand on his grandson's shoulder, his voice as heavy as October wind, sharing the blood. Doesn't mean you understand the man, Grayson. Turn to Lily, with permission. I suggest Lily read the handwritten note Mr. Richard left for Jane. It will help everyone understand why he chose this. I nodded, but before Lily stepped up, Grayson looked at me. His eyes held something, as if he knew a secret only we shared. A tiny, almost invisible smile crossed his face. In that second, the memory of our meeting 8 months ago came rushing back, clear as day. I sat across from Grayson, holding a thick envelope. This is everything I've documented for 10 years, I said, my voice steady. Financial records, texts, recordings. If Richard truly regrets what he did, he'll rewrite the will himself. But if he doesn't, I pushed the envelope across the table. Then use this. Grayson looked at me, a mix of shock and respect in his eyes. You've been preparing for this for a long time. I smiled. Not happy, not sad. I used. To believe in love. But after being betrayed, I learned one thing. Never let someone else write your story. The memory faded. I was back in the present, meeting Grayson's eyes. Lily didn't know this. Ethan didn't either. Only Grayson and I knew. Richard didn't rewrite that will out of pure regret. He also knew that. If he didn't, I had enough evidence to burn his legacy to the ground. I never truly lost everything. I was just waiting for the right moment to strike. Lily took an envelope from her purse, holding it with both hands as if it were glass. Her voice trembled, but she stood firm. This is the letter Dad wrote for Mom while he was in the hospital. A breeze picked up, rustling the ginkgo leaves. Lily began to read, every word echoing into the silence of the earth. Jane, if you're reading this, it means I've lost my chance to say this to your face. I was wrong. Not just once, but over and over again. I pushed you away. I forced you to sign documents I knew were fraudulent. And worst of all, I let Ethan believe you were the one who destroyed this family. But lately, he is the one who made me realize exactly what I'd lost. came to me with contracts and asset spreadsheets without once asking, Dad does. It hurt. But Lily, she says nothing. She just sits by me, wipes the sweat from my forehead, reads to me every afternoon. You are the only person who never turned your back. I'm not leaving everything to you out of guilt. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. Lily folded the letter. Silence. The wind stopped as if the entire cemetery were holding its breath. Ethan's eyes glazed over. A single tear fell onto his leather shoes. His wife gripped his hand, no longer protesting. The truth had been spoken by the one man who had finally chosen to tell it. Every eye turned toward me. No one moved. Dry leaves drifted across the grass. It felt as though nature itself sensed that something irreversible had just happened. I stood silent in the back. Among the stares, I saw shock, anger, and the beginning of an apology. Vanessa had already fled without looking back, her once proud shoulders trembling under her expensive fur coat. Ethan stayed frozen, hands in his pockets, unable to meet my eyes. His wife whispered, "Let's go," but he didn't budge. Instead, he turned to Richard's parents. I'm his only son. I stayed, I carried the company. And now I have nothing. Mr. Miller didn't answer immediately. He just placed a heavy hand on Ethan's shoulder. Sharing blood. Doesn't mean you understand the man. Ethan went stiff. Margaret nodded, her eyes the same ones that had stood by me during the service. Ethan's wife leaned in closer. You don't have to prove anything anymore. I don't think this letter was meant to blame you. Was meant to give you another chance, Ethan whispered. I don't know what to do with that yet. But for the first time, I want to do something that isn't for the company and isn't for money. I gave him a slight empathetic nod. No promises. The thread between us had snapped long ago. Mending, it would take much more than one afternoon. At a funeral, I began to walk away, slowly and without hiding. I needed to leave that place before my heart sank again. Lily followed in silence, her coat fluttering in the breeze like a bird relearning how to fly. I took her hand and squeezed it. As I passed Ethan, I stopped. We looked at each other, no blame, no begging. Just a mother and a son on opposite sides of a broken story. I'm not asking for anything from you, I said. I only hope you don't repeat the path your father lived to regret. He bowed his head. I saw the glint of tears in his eyes. And that was enough. Lily drove us back. I sat beside her, clutching the small leather bag with the letter inside. Neither of us spoke. Only when the car stopped in front of my mother's old house did I ask softly, Do you think I'm wrong for taking all those assets? Lily squeezed my hand. If you didn't take them, Mom, but wrong people would have won. I let out a small, deep laugh. It wasn't about the victory. It was because, for the first time, I wasn't the one being robbed. I had reclaimed my dignity. That night, as I was watering the plants, Lily brought out a small wooden box. Dad left this for you. He told me to give it to only you, no one else. I opened it. An old photo of my young standing in front of our first house, radiant. On the back, his handwriting. I kept this to remind me what real love looked like. Lily's voice broke. I remember when I was little. You were the only one who held me every night. I know you were the only one who truly loved him. Even if he realized it too late, I pulled her close and held her. It's two hearts, quiet in the night garden as autumn finally arrived. From that moment on, I was no longer a side character in someone else's story. But I knew this wasn't the end. It was a beginning at the place I chose to return to. I didn't move into the lakeside mansion. I went back to the old house where we started with nothing, earth-toned walls and the sound of children's laughter on the porch. I didn't tear it down, just restored it, enough to live again. On my terms. I'd changed the curtains, found a second-hand dining set, hung up the paintings that had been hidden away for being off-trend, and bought a new teapot. For the first time in decades, I cooked lemon herb chicken, the meal the family used to love. I called my mother, Do, you want to come live with me? She just asked, "When are you picking me up?" Few days later, she arrived with her fuzzy slippers, her old tote bag, and the smell of toasted bread every morning. I opened the door without hesitation. It's time. I wanted this to be a place where no one had to ask permission to be loved. I called my in-laws too, not because they needed a place to stay, but because their hearts belonged to a home where people were finally honest. They came, bringing very little, just a look in their eyes, as if they were finally coming home. Lily walked in, accompanied by Ethan. I stood still, not knowing what to say. Ethan looked around, his grandfather reading the paper, the two grandmothers, watering plants, and me, standing in the middle of it all, silent but at peace. He gave me a small, silent apology. I didn't say I forgave him. I didn't say everything was fine. I just pointed to the kitchen and said, "The chicken will be ready in 10 minutes. Wash up, because some doors are meant to stay closed. But this was a door without a lock." And for the first time in 30 years, I was the one holding the key.
I didn't say I forgave him. I didn't say everything was fine. I just pointed to the kitchen and said, "The chicken will be ready in 10 minutes. Wash up, because some doors are meant to stay closed. But this was a door without a lock. And for the first time in 30 years, I was the one holding the key." When Lily and I were in the kitchen, she told me that she didn't need the company and only wanted a real family, promising that if Ethan ever truly changed, she would be the one to hand it back to him. I smiled because I knew my daughter finally understood that the only things worth keeping are the people who still know how to find their way home. That evening, she mentioned that Ethan had returned to the Vermont cabin to cook for himself and plant carrots, not even opening his laptop for an entire week. We sat in a comfortable silence, broken only by the sound of silverware and the warm scent of pumpkin bread drifting through the kitchen as hearts began to soften. One morning, my phone rang, and Ethan's name appeared on the screen as he tentatively asked if he could bring the kids to visit for the weekend, even though he knew I didn't need anything from him. I looked at the plants Richard used to prune and the long wooden table with 3 sets of bowls neatly arranged, then smiled and told him I would be baking and not to be late. That weekend, Lily returned with her husband and 2 children, and my heart swelled when my granddaughter ran through the garden calling me Grandma for the very first time. Lily looked at me tenderly and promised they would return every weekend, not because I needed them there, but because this was the place they truly wanted to be. The first afternoon, with all 4 generations present, was filled with the clatter of pots, the scent of cinnamon in the breeze, and old stories retold with eyes full of gratitude. No one mentioned Vanessa or asked how often Ethan would return, because from that day on, we knew the door was left ajar for anyone who truly wished to come back. That night, after the house settled into a peaceful quiet, my phone vibrated 3 times with a call from Vanessa that quickly vanished, and she never called again. I lay awake not out of regret, but wondering if I was becoming like Richard, someone who only knew how to close doors, until I realized he shut his door on those who loved him, while I only shut mine on the person who destroyed everything. I hung my final painting of an open door, with sunlight streaming across the threshold and a hanging basket of flowers, leaving it without a title or note, because anyone passing by would understand this was a home that didn't need a lock. There are houses that don't need locks because the people inside have learned how to open their hearts. Jane's story is more than a tale of betrayal. It is about how a woman rises from the wreckage and silence to create a more beautiful present for those who deserve it. If you have ever been Jane or known someone like her, please leave a message, as these small stories can often heal a broken heart somewhere else. If you believe in justice, kindness, and second chances, please subscribe and share this story with someone who might need it, as it could be the unlocked door they need to find their way home. Now, I have one question for you. Did Jane do the right thing by refusing Vanessa a chance to apologize in person? Comment right. She didn't deserve it, if you believe not everyone is worthy of forgiveness. Or W wrong. Everyone needs a second chance if you think Jane was too cruel.